Vinyl lads and ladies, welcome back to the Vinyl Brotherhood, where we like to kick back, take it easy, and just chat about music, whether it be the latest and greatest new releases or old favorites from years gone by. Today, we are going to reflect back on an old record from the late 90s, and I can't wait to get started, so get comfortable, sit back, relax, and we'll get started momentarily. I hope everyone watching is doing well. Thanks a lot for coming back to see us. Today's selection is one I only just listened to the other day. Apparently, I've been sleeping on American football. This here is the first of 3 LPs, all self-titled. Interestingly enough, there is a 17-year gap between this 1999 release and the second album. As we're making this review, I've yet to listen to the full American football catalog, so unfortunately I may not be able to provide all of the necessary context, but I promise this overview of the debut will be a great time nonetheless. And I hope by now you've picked up on my enthusiasm for this record. I gave it a listen upon it being recommended to me by producer Ian, a connoisseur of both math rock and the Midwest emo subgenres. Appropriately enough, American football is a perfect union of both sounds. It's been a little rainy around these parts these last few weeks, and this album has been the perfect companion to these slow and very gloomy days. I'd love to explain further, so let's go ahead and take this baby over to the record player and we'll dive right in. Let's take a look at the artwork for American Football LP1. Some beautiful photography on the front and the back. And in the gatefold. I believe this is the 2014 reissue, the deluxe edition. Sides C and D include live performances and B-sides and things of that nature. More photography. And best of all, beautiful red vinyl. Now let's talk about American football. They began in the late 90s by some well-experienced Illinois musicians, Mike Kinsella, Steve Holmes, and Steve Lamos. Their initial run may not have made the biggest splash, and they did disband by the year 2000, but over time they've been recognized as one of the more influential acts in the emo realm. You could only have missed their mid-2010s comeback if you were living under a rock. I took notice of the events as they were taking place, and it was interesting to see the hype train leave the station, but like I mentioned earlier, I somehow never got around to giving these guys a proper listen. That's changed since then, thankfully, but before we do our analysis, I think it's important to define our terms, especially when we use a term like emo, which means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. There's even a famous internet copy pasta about this debate. If you don't find these categories useful, just ignore them. But for our purposes today, we need to make clear that in this instance, we don't mean emo as an aesthetic quality. My Chemical Romance is a good example of how emo could be defined in our culture. The skinny jeans, straightened hair, Hot Topic, that whole thing. When we use emo here, we are purely referring to a very particular style of rock music characterized by cleanish guitar tones, complex song structures, and guitar techniques, and a raw vulnerability in both lyrical approach and vocal delivery. I'd refer you to groups like No Knife, Mineral, Taking Back Sunday, Jimmy Eat World, and of course Brand New as decent examples. Very much the somber everyman style of music, and it's in close proximity with punk and post-hardcore, so if you're not familiar with the sound, that can kind of give you an idea. The math rock element on American football is certainly notable in the rhythm section. The album is heavy on the relatively uncommon time signatures, with the intricate guitar phrases following along very closely. These guitar parts are generous with the hammer-ons and pull-offs if you're into that kind of thing, and prominently feature some jangly picking parts layered over each other. It's been such a pleasure to analyze the different parts and how they interact with each other. It's worth noting that all but one song utilizes the standard EAD GBE guitar tuning. How pleasant it is to see those different musical opportunities being explored. The production is pleasantly straightforward and unvarnished, and like the best emo albums, the production tricks seem to be kept at a very comfortable minimum, allowing the music some room to speak for itself, which is perfect in this instance, as American football love themselves some meandering musical passages. If I were told that the album was recorded yesterday, I wouldn't have any trouble believing that. The uncompromised guitar tones are obviously going to age very well, and they sound awesome in the roomy mix front and center, at times even obscuring the dry, unembellished vocals by Mike Kinsella. The music is also very well performed on a technical level. The performances are very clean and well executed without sacrificing a single shred of humanity, which is super important. And a part of me really considers the warm analog tape sound to be the cherry on top of this whole production. And you know, if you want like instant vibes, this is the way that you have to go. And I can imagine now listening to this album on a dark day in the autumn, letting the cozy trumpet sound on the summer ends fill the atmosphere around me. And unfortunately, the summer is about to begin here right now as we record this, so I'll have to wait a few months to appreciate this song to its fullest potential. But that's just a tangent. Let's go back to our album. American Football is very much a full album listening experience rather than a collection of super accessible could-be-hit singles. And we're working off a pretty limited palette here. You have your guitar, your drums, and then like the trumpets, keyboards, and bass guitars make special appearances here and there. This means that it's up to the songwriting to do the heavy lifting, and the band doesn't disappoint on that front. Shifting dynamics on tracks like Honestly and Stay Home are mesmerizing as they lure you in with a solid riff and vocals before drifting off into an endlessly whirling kaleidoscope of layered guitars. The album features some lengthier instrumental segments as well as two completely instrumental compositions, You Know I Should Be Leaving Soon and the one with the Wurlitzer, which in fact does feature a nice melodious Wurlitzer as a quiet send-off. You can appreciate these at different levels, which makes this a good album for various occasions. There are beautiful pieces that become more and more rewarding with subsequent listens, but also serve as great background music, especially now in the era of 24-hour lo-fi jazz and trip-hop streams on YouTube. A few other songs on the record aren't quite as laid back, such as I'll See You When We're Both Not So Emotional. And I really dig that energetic shuffle on the drums, paired nicely with the tremolo guitar lead. It features some very classical emo lyrics that I will now recite as I segue into the next part of this review. If you're so prone to accidents and misunderstandings, you may accidentally misinterpret honesty for selfishness. We're two human beings, individually with inherent interest in each other and how we relate. End quote. It may be a tad on the needlessly verbose side, but it's still very direct, and not much in the way of metaphors or lyrical devices. And for the most part, it's just a dude with his heart on his sleeve. Like I said, he's just typical emo genre stuff. He's trying to work his way through some confusing relationship stuff like we all do at one point or another. In any case, it's still very compelling and, dare I say, even endearing in its very unabashed approach and the seemingly improvised vocal delivery. There's a lot of the same on this record, but to our benefit, the same is very, very good. And yet I still feel like there are a couple of missing pieces by the end of the 40-minute runtime. But you know, maybe another track would have felt like too much of a good thing. And I know that I'm living at a really nice point in time where I have a couple more albums and an EP's worth of American football to enjoy. But for anyone who enjoyed this in the 90s/early aughts, I can't imagine how frustrating the lack of output must have been. In any case, these 9 brilliant tracks have undeniable longevity, and it's no surprise that they resonate so well with their audience even today. It must hurt to consider what could have been. You know, what music could they have given us had they never stepped away for so long? It's a big what if, and I'd love to know what you all think. But for now, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. I've got a couple of closing thoughts, so we may as well head back to the couch over there. If I can get this sleeve into the jacket. American Football's debut album is widely considered to be a classic go-to album in the worlds of both emo and math rock. I think it would make a suitable introduction for those who are intrigued by these musical stylings. At least give it track 1, Never Meant to Listen, to get an idea of what it's all about. Despite its musical complexity, it's still a very easy listen, not too unlike listening to jazz with its out-of-the-box time signatures and irregular song structures. On a personal note, I find it sad that I allowed years of my life to go by without having ever indulged in this essential listening experience. It is slightly out of my wheelhouse, and I don't know that it's always going to be my first choice, but I very much respect it for the gem that it is, and it's my genuine pleasure to score it an 8.5 out of 10 today. It's a beautiful work of art, and there is undoubtedly a time and a place for it in everyone's life. I'd like to know what you all think of this iconic album in the comments, so if you've been listening since the 90s, please let us know what this album means to you. As for me, I'm sure I'll be checking out the rest of their work in the near future, but that's more or less all I've got for today. Thanks for coming by. Please be sure to keep in touch, and I should mention we do have our companion Instagram page with updates, daily photos, and more. The link is in the description down below. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I pray it's filled with good times and great music. We'll see you again very soon right here at the Vinyl Brotherhood.